I'm right here. Don't you worry. Coming. Mind if I get some coffee and water? Hang on 1 second, guys. I can't find it. Can't find it. Don't see it. I'll just take a body armor instead. Babe. All right, let's do this thing. Let's do it. All right, folks, welcome to Inside the Numbers with the People's Pundit. I'm your host, Rich Paris, People's Pundit. Don't forget to like the videos if you like them and share them far and wide. And of course, cross-subscribe. If you're on Rumble, go over to Locals. On Rumble, go to YouTube, go to Rumble. You know the deal. Advertisers and algorithms is what makes the Vlogcast world go round. All right, but of course, the best place, as always, to follow us is right down there, peoplespundit.locals.com. peoplespundit.locals.com. All right, before we dive into the national poll results, which we'll discuss why I may or may not track this thing serious. I mean, of course, I'd be serious, but I mean, like, I may drop a final on Sunday or something. All right, and here's why. Because we're getting to the stage in the campaign now where a lot of people have voted already, and those people don't want to talk, especially Republicans. They do this all the time. All right, they're in presidential race. They're just tired of hearing the ads. They're tired of hearing pollsters call them, and they're just like, at some point, I'm done. And we could clearly see, I mean, you can see the sample size we collected. I was hoping to stop a little over 2,000. I just wanted to oversample Hispanics and Black voters to get a final on whether or not this was real. But I had to keep going because there was very clearly a response bias, which is a big part of what I want to talk to you about today. You know, there's this idea. Nate Cohen wrote an article. I was talking to some other people, poll reporters, whatever you want to call them, basically saying, it's this argument that the polls actually, are they understating Trump's support again because of, what they've done in 16 and 20? Or is this more like 22, right? Well, I mean, the fact of the matter is we are getting early vote data, and the likelihood that the polls are overstating Trump and understating Harris is extremely low. Is it possible? Of course, I have to say that. Is it likely or probable? No. In fact, it's much more probable and it's much more likely that the polls are hedging. I think many of them are hurting. You may notice now even Monmouth just heard it to us in Pennsylvania. All right. So you probably heard me say, there are twists that can happen in a campaign, but the fact of the matter is I've conducted final polls in September, at the end of September, and been more accurate than people who tracked the election all the way to election day. I like tracking. I think it's fun. But I also think that some elections, a lot of things are baked into the cake, and it's very difficult to overturn the variable that we call mood of the electorate. All right. And that includes, who do you trust to handle issues more? What are your most important issues? Right. What is the right track, wrong track, presidential approval rating, favorabilities? By the way, I put Trump and Harris and Biden's favorables in here yet? I did. Good. All right, we want to talk about that. Trump's going to end here. We're exactly like Gallup. Trump is going to end with a higher approval rating than Kamala Harris. We also did favorability, and I'll add it, and probably by the end of the day. And you will see that Trump's favorability image is going to be about +2. Harris is going to be about -3. All right, so she's on a trajectory down where she was before the media spin, before the tens and tens of millions of dollars in ad buys to try to change people's minds about how they felt about her before. All right. And then we're going to dive into this question. Can Trump win the popular vote? There's something I saw on Twitter, even though I said embargoed for locals. All right. Obviously, it always leaks out and gets passed around. There's a separation of likely versus unlikely voters, but there is not a display, not yet, and I'm going to do it. There's not a display of all the other demographic groups within the likely and unlikely voter breakdown. So there's not region nested by likely voters. There isn't party detail or party nested by likely voters. We'll go over the entire sample first. I mean, if we have time, I would really like to go over, I would like to create one right in front of you to show you, for instance, the difference between the registered voter universe and the likely voter universe. Because ultimately, here, what we're seeing, and we are seeing it, there's no way to deny it. The voter registration trends, part of it is just Harris. And I told you she had a very Hillary Clinton like feel to me, even worse to some degree. At least Hillary Clinton was like, lived in Arkansas, was the first lady of a popular president who was from the South, who won West Virginia. I mean, they're asking us to believe that this woman who was raised in Canada with her mother, with not even as a Christian, which is fine. I'm just saying, think about what you're saying here. As if she was going to be stronger than Joe Biden. You know, I think it's kind of funny this year. Every year, you have all these independent pollsters like myself, Trafalgar, Rasmussen. There are others, Matt Towery at Insider Advantage. We all get maligned as Republican pollsters. I hate the Republican Party, and it pisses me off when somebody writes that. Maybe I shouldn't tell them that, because every time they write it, they're going to know they're pissing me off. Whatever. But I can't stand the Republican Party, and everybody who knows me knows that. Right-leaning. And if we're right-leaning, as my column years ago, I had written, which was circulated and reprinted everywhere. If we're right-leaning, what the hell does that make you? Hillary Clinton's pollster polls for NBC News. All right. CNBC. Hart Research. Long time conducted the NBC Wall Street Journal poll before they split. Give me a break. And this year, we're more in the consensus with every other poll. Monmouth just mimicked our Pennsylvania poll, even though they don't even ask a correct ballot question. They don't. Definitely, probably, you're going to do this? Probably, definitely. That's bullshit. Who are you voting for? Is a ballot question. Or did vote for already. They can't even gauge the early vote, which we did, and it's fascinating. And by the way, you will notice the sample size for vote method and vote method by detail, the latter just being an expanded version of the former. You will notice the sample size is smaller than the overall registered voter universe. Why? Because that's the actual likely voting electorate. They didn't get that question if they were unlikely to vote or certain not to vote. They did not get it. There's always very few people who will say, I'm not voting, but then we look at their vote history and it's like Helga, and she's 90 years old, and Helga has voted in every election since Helga's been eligible to vote. So we just call bullshit and Helga goes in the model. Okay? That's why there's always like, maybe you'll see like 0.2, 0.6. It's the Helgas of the world. All right? Just keep that in mind. All right. Anyway, instead of this normal dynamic going on, we have Monmouth, the New York Times. I mean, our poll is almost identical to the New York Times. It's really, really incredible. When you look at the likely voter sample, you will see, for instance, a perfect example is the Midwestern margin. In the Midwest, Trump is ahead by like 6 among registered voters. Among the actual voting electorate, Trump is ahead by 10. Actually, it's a little over 10. Among white voters, he's ahead by just about his 2020 margin. On the likelies, he's ahead by a little bit more than the 2020 margin. And by the way, even in the registered voter sample, the reason why it's Trump is just a hair ahead in the registered voter sample, not, a meaningful rounded lead. And the reason is because of this change in the non-white vote. So sampling errors for subgroups are higher, right? Whites tend to poll to the left of how they actually vote. It's just true. That's just like how in the past, in certain polls, non-whites have tended to poll to the right of how they actually have voted. All right. In certain polls. If Trump, let's say, is, winning the white vote by 12, right? He lost a point from 2020. He's got to make it up by doing about 6 points better with black voters. Well, he's more than doing that. And then also, that doesn't even take into account Hispanic voters who we think this time, for the first time ever, Hispanic voters will outbeat, I don't want to say outvote, they will be a larger share of the electorate for the first time ever than black voters. If we have time, we'll go through the census. I mean, folks, black voters peaked. Barnes and I have talked about this a lot as far as turnout rates. Black voters peaked many years ago and have been trending down ever since. Hispanics have been trending up. So this was, although there are periods where, like from 08 to 2012, yes, there were more raw votes from Hispanics in the electorate, but as a share of their voting eligible population, their turnout rate actually decreased. But this time we think that that's going to happen, and it's going to be close, but it's going to happen. We ticked up our after the oversampling, we did tick our projections up for black voters from 10.8 to 11.5. That may be too high. In fact, I'm leaning towards it's too high. But Hispanics will be a more firm 12%, all right? Or if they're both 11, for instance, it'll be a more firm 11%. All right. And we're thinking, it's going to range anywhere from 0.2 to 1.2% more Hispanic than black. All right. Whites, 71%. They're not going to budge that much this year. They may go down to 70, but these 67% turnout projections among whites is just total bullshit. We would need a larger share of the Hispanic population to vote at much higher rates than what we're seeing now. They are saying they're going to vote compared to other races at a higher rate than we've seen in prior years, but there is nothing suggesting that there's going to be this historical, turnout rate among Hispanics while whites don't turn out. So, for instance, look at the early vote in Georgia. Whites are most definitely outpacing their typical share of the electorate. Ditto North Carolina. Ditto in basically in Florida. I'd have to look, but I don't know about that in Florida. But in basically every battleground state where you look right now, it's whiter than it has been in the past. Arizona. Younger independent non-whites that Democrats were younger independent non-whites that Democrats were hoping for in Nevada to come out in Clark County yesterday, the day before, over the weekend. Didn't happen. And again, you're going to see that in the likely voter model in a second. I'm going to show you this. She is most definitely facing a situation, the scenario we have been talking about, which is the scenario in which the worst case scenario happens for her. It's not exceedingly high turnout, which could be good for her in under certain circumstances, but under others, unfortunately for Democrats, Republican registrations have been far outpacing theirs, and the normies, low props, actually are very Trumpy this year. So she needed a situation where theirs turn out at higher rates, like 22. And that's it. And Republicans don't. They don't get their low props out. They don't, that's not happening. And in fact, they're like middle of the road propensity voters who are voting for Republicans, Trump particularly, but not voting for coming out to vote for Kamala. And you're going to see it. I'm going to show it to you. All right. Anyway, before we get into that, point I'm saying is instead of us being out of the consensus this year, all the other polls are hurting to us and the rest of us who have been maligned for years. And instead, we're getting these academic institute polls nobody knows or has ever heard of, right? And we're getting these left-wing think tanks, because they're all left-wing. They're left-wing academic and left-wing think tanks that are coming out for ridiculous margins that are more democratic than they were for Biden in 2020. It's absolutely ludicrous. Ludicrous. She's going to do better than Biden. Cue the hand gesture that Laura doesn't like me to make on camera. All right. Before we get into this, we all heard about Biden's gaffe. Biden, and I don't even know that we can call it a gaffe, but Biden's career as a public official has been filled and just gaffe-prone, just filled with one foot in mouth moment after the other. The guy has been an idiot for a long time. I don't think this was a gaffe. This is how the modern Democratic Party feels about a large chunk of the country. And I'm sorry if you're a Democrat and you're watching. Like, I don't know why people play these games. Like, I love some other shows and I watch them all the time. But it's like they think they're going to like make friends or keep friends by hedging the things they say and hiding things from people, right? So, I'm not saying this, but some people think this. Like, you just said it. Like, cut the shit. You know that Democrats hate half the country. Just cut the shit. Joe Biden wasn't always that person. I don't know what's happened to him. He's senile now. He's run down. He was always a political whore. And out of his own words, of his own mouth, like he didn't ever have a core. But he liked people. I don't know what happened to that Joe. I never thought he would have like a moment that's worse than Hillary Clinton's deplorable moment. But the reason this is so bad is because Harris and Democrats and the media runs modern Democratic campaigns, chose to make the Puerto Rico garbage comment, which was a joke from a comedian in a warm-up, chose to make that the number one story in the country. Her closing message. And now they're going to try to cover it up and pretend like Joe Biden didn't say it's impossible. Just like Hillary Clinton tried to run away from deplorables, it's impossible. Unfortunately for them, huge percentages of independents get their news from places like X and YouTube. CNN cannot keep this genie in the bottle. Anyway, before we get into the polling results, I'm going to run the clip. Today is a clip where we don't pick on Harry. Today is a clip where we actually do show something. Harry's done a pivot now. I have been urging people, they need, especially people on the left who are respected as election forecasters and pundits, that you need to begin to stop the copium bullshit. You need to begin to have conversations with your people right now and tell them it's not certain, but there is a high degree of likelihood that you're going to lose. You should not lose your mind if you lose. The problem that Democrats had in 16 is that they couldn't understand or grasp the concept of, oh my God, I lost. They were told incessantly they were going to win. There was no chance they were going to lose. And the right, you better keep that in mind. I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm saying like you should keep that in mind. I think honestly, obviously, Trump is favored to win this election. But there are still pundits and forecasters and frankly, the early vote grifting industry that is doing this to them. And if and when they lose, which is, again, a likely scenario, they're going to wonder what happened. And it'll be so easy to plant blame in some fake straw man like they did with Vladimir Putin in 2016. whopped up this collusion story, all this other nonsense. We cannot have this as a country. We have got to learn to move on. That's why, Democrats, you should not be closing early voting early because you know those are Republicans in line. All right. You should not be playing games in Pennsylvania where you have to be sued because you know you're going to lose. All right. You should not be pulling some bullshit in Nevada where you postmark stuff where you count things that aren't postmarked that arrive up until 5 p.m. the third day after election. I mean, it's ridiculous. Or, by the way, allow illegals in Virginia to vote. And then you like blame the so-called election deniers about the anger in the country. Like, you did that. You don't see Republicans pulling mass voter disenfranchisement. Come on. This cannot happen. And by the way, right, without some like concrete evidence, you cannot run around and blame everybody for election fraud every time you lose on the same flip side of it. All right, look, I'm not Barbara Walters and I'm not a therapist. It's everybody's job to carry this load, and I shouldn't fill my entire episode with more of these sessions because nobody else is doing it. That's not true. Mark Halpern is. And Harry is beginning to try, but tomorrow he'll probably be back with some bullshit. Here he is.
28% of Americans, voters, think the country is going in the right direction, is on the right track. And I want you to put that into a historical perspective for you. Okay, what's the average percentage of the public that thinks that the country is on the right track when the incumbent party loses? It's 25%. That 25% looks an awful bit like that 28% up there. It doesn't look anything like this 42% doesn't look anything like this 28%. So the bottom line is, very few Americans think the country is on the right track at this particular point. It tracks much more with when the incumbent party loses than with it wins. In fact, I went back through history. There isn't a single time in which 28% of the American public thinks the country is going on the right track in which the incumbent party actually won. They always lose when just 28% of the country believes that the country is on the right track.
It is. Hold on one second. Okay. So he puts this up on Twitter today, and he says, look, if Kamala Harris loses, the signs were always there. Oh, okay. All right. Because that's how you've been talking to your viewers. Sure. But I just want to point something out real quick. Here's the brand new national poll, and here's right track, wrong track. Look at that. It's 28% on the nose. On the nose. Wrong track, 60.1. Wow. By the way, you may want to take a look at gender. 31.8% of men say that the country is actually headed in the right direction. Females, 24.5% say it's headed in the right direction. So females actually think that it's headed in the wrong direction. Part of that can maybe be explained by they think they're going to lose. Some liberal women, so they're saying that. All right. That's not totally, it's more theoretical. Or it could just be that Atlas Intel is right and the margin with women is not big at all for Kamala Harris.
Upstream,
We'll see.
If you're trying to win in this environment. Also, President Biden, on a micro level, a lot of the coverage today is over something President Biden said. On the macro level, what kind of a weight is he on the Harris campaign?
Yeah, so, Joe Biden isn't on the ballot, but he's certainly in the minds of Americans, right? So I went back and I looked, okay, was the successor of the same party when the president's net approval rating was negative at this point, which Joe Biden's most definitely is? He's 15 points underwater. Now, we don't know if Kamala Harris is going to succeed Joe Biden, but we know back in 2008, George W. Bush, his approval rating was down in the 20s. Did a Republican succeed George W. Bush? No. How about in 1968? Lyndon Baines Johnson, his net approval rating was negative. Did a Democrat succeed Lyndon Baines Johnson? No. How about in 52? Harry S. Truman, his approval rating was in the 20s, if not the upper teens. Did a Democrat succeed Harry S. Truman in 52? My memory, no. No, as Kate Baldwin says.
Diana.
No. Diana.
Sempre Sora.
Close, wrong time of year. Dwight Eisenhower, a Republican, succeeded Harry S. Truman. So the bottom line is, for Kamala Harris to win, she'd have to break history, be a Democrat to succeed Joe Biden when Biden's approval rating is way underwater at this point.
Again, it could happen. It just doesn't in his, in recent history for sure. Okay, registration numbers, Harry.
Yeah, Republicans have been registering.
Okay, so you see a pattern here. Harry is echoing everything that we have been telling you for how long? All right. I mean, the truth of the matter is, anyone who ever told you this election cycle, the fundamentals favored Kamala Harris or Joe Biden, were either lying to you or too stupid to listen to. The fundamentals of this election have favored Donald Trump for over a year and a half. Over a year and a half. Arguably more, even if you go back to the 22 cycle where Trump was outrunning even the Republicans who were overpolled. Even take our poll in Georgia, for instance. We had Walker up by 1, Walker lost by 1 in the first round of voting. Right? We had Brian Kemp up by 7. He won roughly by 7. We had Donald Trump up over Brian Kemp at that time in Georgia in the rematch. Now, it's not at all inconceivable that Trump wins Georgia by a lot. 6 points. So even though maybe the situation got a little bit better for her, the fundamentals have not changed.
Voters in big, huge numbers. They have been gaining in party registration.
This is why they cannot build their firewall. By the way, I see your questions about the firewall. Multiple people are asking about that. I will try to answer that as we talk about the early vote in the poll. All right. But you cannot build the firewalls you had in 2020 if you don't have the voting eligible population with the registration advantage among the voting eligible population that you had in these states. I don't know why John keeps every night hoping against hope that there's going to be some huge firewall surge in Clark County. Folks, the registration advantage that Democrats had in Clark County when Joe Biden built that firewall of 20,000 votes 4 days into early voting, the advantage was 3 times the advantage they have now in Clark County. We all saw what happened to Florida. Many of these states, Arizona, North Carolina, Nevada under the radar here, have been mimicking Florida. Why is that? By the way, there's two reasons. One, the non-white vote shift in some of these states is a big deal, coupled with state-to-state migration. Republicans leaving California, New York, Illinois, big blue states, and and we know this. We know it from my polling that asks about generational. Where were you born? Where did you move? Did you recently move? We know this. We've been asking these questions for years, but the census confirmed us 4 years ago. That is where they're going, and it has ramped up ever since. COVID, in many examples, exacerbated these trends. People leaving and saying, the hell with it, you can have your state. And then a change in the second, third generation voting patterns for non-white voters.
Swing states with party registration. We're talking Arizona. I think it's a 5-point. They've expanded their lead from 5 points from where it was back in 2020. How about Nevada?
Yes, that's true. In 2020, Arizona was only R+2. Maricopa was almost even. It's now R+7. It's the biggest registration advantage Republicans have ever had. When Donald Trump won Arizona, he won the early vote by just a few points, like a few points, a point and a half or something like that. And it was R plus almost 3. It's now R+7. And they have over a 100,000 vote lead in the early vote. Folks, it's like people are living in the past. That's why we're seeing like these D+6 samples in this state and nationally. It doesn't exist anymore.
Big Republican registrations there. They like the early vote. How about North Carolina? Big Republican registration games. How about Pennsylvania?
And they're leading.
We spoke about it before a few months ago. Big Republican Party registration gains versus from where they were 4 years ago. So Republicans are putting more Republicans in the electorate. The Democratic number versus the Republican number has shrunk. And so the bottom line is, if Republicans win, come next week, Donald Trump comes next week, the signs all along will have been obvious. We would look at the right direction being very low, Joe Biden's approval rating being
obvious. were obvious. I can't stress this enough. Week after week, day after day, whether it was Inside the Numbers or Barnes and I, and what are the odds? Always pointing this out. Always. Hold on. We need more light up in here, man. Hold on. I can't see. That's not good for your eyes. There we go. Pointing this out forever. The environment never favored Harris. The trends never favored Harris. That is just the truth. He says if he wins, it would be obvious.
Very low, and Republicans really registering numbers. You can't say you weren't warned.
Again,
bang. All right, we're done. You cannot say you weren't warned, he says. Okay. All right, let's take a look at that. He was bringing up that early vote. Let's take a look at that early vote in the poll. First of all, let's glean some of the top lines. All right. Remember, actually, let me first go to just likely versus unlikely, and then we'll do everything with that. Okay. As you can see, obviously, I mean, crossing and referencing this, it's obvious. There is no unlikely sample there. Like I told you before, look at this. Already voted, plan to vote early, plan to vote on election day. You can clearly see the likely voter model is working. All right. Already voted 44, plan to vote early 27, plan to vote on election day 29. Tip has election day at 51. We do not. All right. That's just I don't know that anyone thinks at this point there still will be a majority of the vote. I mean, I don't know. We'll see. We'll just have to see how the weekend goes in some of these states. All right. So already in person, 15%. All right. So we'll get into all of this. Bear with me. Unlikely voters, obviously, they think that the country is headed in the right direction by a lower share than those who are likely voters. And you would think that would help Kamala, but it actually does not. All right. Overall, in the sample, just two-party. Standard head-to-head with no third-party candidates in the mix. All right. Donald Trump, 50.1. Harris, 49.9. There are literally 6 interviews that separate them. However, among likely voters, the gap widens. It begins to widen. 50.3 to 49.7. This is a thought exercise. And we also did this someone else, and it was like almost identical anyway. It was in between the generic with leaners and the 5-way generic with leaners and the standard head-to-head with leaners. It was right in between. It was Trump 49, Harris 48. So still a Trump +1. Doesn't matter when you state the full ballot, which we like obviously more because it's more realistic, right? You're putting candidates' names on there. You even give them a generic someone else because they'll be like De La Hoya, whatever her name is in Florida and some states. They will not be in other states, so we still give them the generic someone else. As you can see, as we go down here, Trump actually does better as we give people the full ballot, the realistic ballot. So, yeah, I mean, I guess he's like, 0.06 ahead in the head-to-head, but he's a full rounded point ahead in the 5-way generic. This is why I told locals last night that I see what people are talking about when they're going with these 50-50s. It's a tie. It's a tie. You have to do your job as a pollster, and you have to, you want to call it. I've been talking to a lot of them. They think it's risky. This is the safe bet. Your job is not to do the safe bet, right? This is why I miss Gallup. Your job is not to do the safe bet. Your job is to, if you want to be a little bit conservative with your projections, fine. And I don't mean conservative as in right leaning. I mean, if you don't want to be too bold, whatever, that's on you and your decision. But it is your job to tell the American electorate who you think is going to vote. All right. And not only that, it better be in line with what you're seeing already when you put out these early vote projections. Otherwise, people can easily pick them apart. It was obvious. Let's use the word of the day. It was obvious in 2020 that Biden's margins were overstated, with the exception of the fanatics like Boner at Target Fart. We could see the demographics of who already were voting. Biden, even in our polls, in the raw especially, coming back with ridiculous margins among people who already voted that we knew did not exist. It was a heavy D plus electorate. It was D plus 28. But I'm telling you, he came back with 50-point margins sometimes in the already voted, and Democrats would be 50 plus points or 45 points, most of that percentage of that sample. And we knew that that was not right, and people were just ignoring it. The Marist poll the other day showed projections for Arizona, Georgia, and Nevada. They were wrong. We know they were wrong. So obviously, it's another sign that there is a polling miss that probably will favor Trump. And listen, I'm not going to be surprised if the Wall Street Journal poll is right. They don't have a history of understating Republican support as bad as some of the other polls. They may have adjusted. They have a Trump plus 3, for those who don't know what I'm talking about. They may have adjusted something, and maybe they overcorrected a little bit, and he ends up winning by 2. It's still, oh my God, it's a good poll. It's a good poll. All right. So I would not be surprised if Trump does win the popular vote. That's the answer to the main banner headline today. I would not be surprised if he does. And I actually would not be surprised if he does by more than we are projecting here, because I don't think Chase Oliver is going to get that vote. That's number one. And I think that's going to inch Trump up a little bit. Now, it's just my experience from what happened to us in 16 and then in 20 when it dropped. And they're typically overstated in our polling. And it's something we've been looking at for a while. But in any event, I don't think he's getting that vote. And I think the margins are going to be just like in 2020. We had Biden by a little over 4. He won by almost 4.5. So, the margin was right, but the vote share for third party was a little bit too high. All right. So, and that's something we obviously, as any other pollster will do, look at and try to correct the next time. And we can see that our shares are lower, but I still don't think he's getting 1.8. I think he's nationally going to get around 1 point, and that's it. Cornel West, I actually think I don't want to say play with the weights. I'm not saying that. Like, if you change some of the projections to some of the alternate projections that we were looking at, Cornel West actually gets more of the vote than Chase Oliver. And Jill Stein is actually the one who's got the most votes out of any third-party candidate. All right, but I'm sure a whole lot of people don't really care all that much to hear about that. Biden's approval doesn't end as bad as it's been in some of our other polls, but it's still kind of bad. As you can see here, among likely voters, Harris is 48.8 as far as approval, but among the entire electorate, she's only 48, and she is, look, she's slightly positive with approval. No, she's not anymore. That's right. She's -3. Sorry, I just haven't put it up yet. I was going to say she's slightly positive with favorables, but she's about even with approvals. But Trump outperforms her when it comes to approval ratings. His retrospective approval rating, which is do you approve or disapprove of the way Trump handled his job as president, 33.9% of the overall strongly approve. Now 35.2% of the likely voter electorate strongly approves. 18% of everyone somewhat approves. Same thing basically with the likely voting electorate. So this is the highest Trump has ever been in our poll. He had crossed that threshold. We made a big deal about it when he became majority positive. This is inching higher. Okay. I don't know how much more high it can get. I mean, having Trump at like 53% is already pretty high. I don't know how much more where he can go, but we had him like a little over 50, then 51.9, 52. Now he's up now to 53. All right. So this is a big problem for Harris. She has closed the trust to handle issues thing, but it's not enough because Trump leads on 3 of the 4 top main issues and 3 of the 3 top voting issues, and by a huge margin with immigration and border security. So we now have a lot of tracking data from the last probably, more than that, more than 6 months. But when they pulled the switcheroo and Harris got thrown back into the race, abortion temporarily overtook immigration and border security as one of the most important voting issues. It swapped out the 3rd place. And then immigration went to 4th, but it was not a distant 4th. It was right on abortion's heels. We do it things a little different, probably going to be different than the exit polls. Inflation and cost of living is not separated in the exit polls. I don't think they will be again this year. We did. And economy and jobs is obviously separated. That is second. Inflation and cost of living is running away with it, followed by the economy and jobs. And then closely behind economy and jobs now, the closest it's been in months is immigration and border security. Trump has a massive lead on immigration and border security, some damn 20 points. He's only got like a 5-point lead on the economy and jobs and about a 10-point lead on inflation and cost of living. It's 11 points, something like that. So he's starting to widen that out again after having a much narrower lead in some of our polling recently before this. Interesting, too. We did ask the shy Trump vote thing. Do you believe there's a significant number of shy voters who do not want to share that they are voting for Donald Trump? 62% say yes, 19% say no, another 20% say they're unsure. If you guys remember, that's roughly on par with what it was in 2020. Let's see who they are, shall we? Because I think it's pretty interesting. Before we do that, let's go back to race detail. All right, let's look at the actual ballot. Bottom line here, when there is no other candidate on the ballot and it is just them, Trump is getting about 23% of the African-American vote. With the full ballot, which is not a thought exercise, it's the real ballot in most states, 17.8%. So he'll end up just about 20%, just under, of the black vote in our polling. All right, and this is with leaners. He is doing that by getting roughly 30% of black men. Just under 30% of black men. And now he is getting in the low teens to mid-teens, depending on the ballot scenario, of black women. So this is absolutely real. I don't know how. It's October 30th. In my entire career, folks, I have seen Republican candidates flirt with increased support among black voters. Sometimes it marginally increases. Sometimes it stays in rare instances. I remember polling Rubio's race for Senate, and it was saying he was going to get like 18% of the black vote. He did. I remember polling Ron DeSantis's race against Andrew Gillum. Everyone mocked me for it, but we had Ron DeSantis getting about 19% of black voters against a black man. And guess what? The exit polls, I think, had him at like 16 or 17%. So every once in a while, it doesn't dissipate. We get through Labor Day and it's summer and it weathered the summer storm. And then, we get to election. It just doesn't seem to be budging something about it. He's going to get it or she's going to get it. And they roughly do. Most of the time, they don't. But that support will evaporate in the summer and definitely in and around Labor Day or shortly after. And they just don't get it. It doesn't happen. It doesn't really materialize. It was a flirt. Well, this isn't a flirt. Don't be surprised if Trump wins Hispanic men, because I think he's going to. When we don't put anybody else in the ballot, Trump reaches nearly the mid-40s with Hispanics. On the full ballot, as you could see, he budges out around 40%. Remember, sampling errors for subgroups are higher. If he's getting 43% in the head-to-head, what's the most likely scenario? The sampling error is going to go which way? Right. Because, of course, 4% are not going to vote for Chase Oliver. I'm always willing to criticize my own polling when I think something is like, noise. Because sometimes there's nothing you can do when it comes to noise. I think Trump's most likely share of the Hispanic vote is around 40%, with him capable of getting to a high of around 44 or 45%. I do think that absolutely can happen. I don't think he's getting 37%. It's not happening. There are too many that when we polled them and asked them who they voted for, he's always increased from that share by around 5 points or more. So he's, gone up from like 37% in the recall to like 42 or 43. Like it's been consistent for a very long time. Harris is winning Asians by nearly a comparable margin, although Trump is gaining with them. I mean, again, it's not like she's doing well with them, but she's not doing as well as other Democratic candidates do with Asian voters, or any of these voters for that matter. And you might notice that the white vote has not budged. It's basically identical to what Trump got, or the margin is. And because, I got to tell you, polls tend to understate Trump's support with white voters. This is extremely problematic for her. All right. I don't think we have to go too much there. Did I put generic in there? Look, it's official. Republicans are going to end up in our polling, our national polling, trailing Donald Trump, both in margin and vote share. And the fact that the reason is very simple. They are not doing as well with non-white voters as Donald Trump is, nor are they doing as well with certain white voters. They're going to win the white vote. They're just not doing as well as anticipated. It's, at the end of the day, we could be understating both of them with white voters, and Republicans do better than expected. But they're not going to get every single non-white vote that Trump did. And I hate to break everybody's bubble. It's just true. They better hope the guy has huge coattails, because they did this. This is their fault. Let me give you a quick example. Maybe they should have spent that time and money and other resources reaching out to Hispanic voters, reaching out to black voters on behalf of Kerry Lake or Sam Brown or Mike Rogers or whatever it may be, instead of trying to win over white, rich liberals in Maryland who were never going to vote for Larry Hogan. There's one example I can give you off the top of my head. It is not good enough for Mitch McConnell to go. Steve Daines is a good dude. By all accounts, people who know him, he's a good dude. But it's more than just one man. This entire consultant, NRSC brain trust apparatus don't like their base. They don't understand them. They don't like them. So Steve, Senator, get rid of them. Bringing younger, fresh minds who have a deeper connection to your voters than those idiots do. You could have had a lot more Senate seats this cycle. Probably, and by the way, your counterparts in the House, without a doubt, I don't care if the polling is a miss and they wind up taking, the lion's share of the 40 toss-up seats that are out there. They could have taken more. And if you're good enough with being just a good enough winner, then you know what? You deserve what you got coming to you. But again, Trump will once again, in all likelihood, give more than he ever gets when it comes to the coalition swap. And I'll put the generic ballot in there, locals, very, very soon, okay? It's already done. I just don't want to have to. I'm going to show you the back end anyway in a second, because I want to do some nesting, all right? All right, let's get into the vote already. Who voted what? Voted, right? And I like this because it is only showing us people we know are in the likely voter electorate, not people that are, kind of, well, they're not. It doesn't matter. It's not going to impact the vote. One thing before we do. Likely voters versus unlikely voters. Okay. Here's both ballot scenarios. What do you notice? Harris has a lot of support that isn't likely to vote. Down here, down there, down everywhere. But up 8 among those who tell us they're probably not going to vote. Or certain not to. Up another 6 in the head-to-head. Right? So there it is. All right, let's go to vote method detail. Damn, we're coming up on an hour already. That sucks. All right. This is cool. You can go through the demographics of this if you want, which is pretty cool. Who's voting how? If we go to party detail, we can actually take a look at that real quick, and then we'll go to the actual vote preference. All right. So as you can see, this is almost identical to what the actual if you just look, we regrouped everything, which is just like every voting method that's for early voting that already voted, every voting method that plans to vote early, and every voting method that plans to vote on election day. It's more than just in person, right? There's in person and doing it at the booth. And then there's in person and dropping it off at a so-called secure, should say, and dropping it off at a secure location. All right, you can see plan to vote on election day will be more Republican, and already voted is actually, and again, folks, this is nationally. Already voted is only Democrat plus 5, according to an analysis run by AP, who's tracking the early vote in every early voting eligible state. That's almost identical to what it is right now. So pretty good. Feel pretty good about that. Independence a little bit high, but it is what it is. And then, by the way, this is detail that includes someone else. We may be understating thirds here. Possibly, we'll see. I'm always willing to admit where there could be error. Voting in by detail, however, already voted in person is certainly more Republican. Already voted via absentee ballot is and drop off is a little bit more Democratic. Obviously, voted by mail is the most Democratic. Plan to vote early in person is more Republican. Plan to vote early via absentee ballot at a drop off location is about even, but just a slight edge for Democrats, which remember, because this indicates that independent group is not going to vote heavily for Harris, as some people who have been hoping and praying every day on their early vote blog that those people come out. It doesn't look good. All right. Plan to vote via absentee ballot early by mail is what the late arriving mail. All right. Or I wouldn't even say late arriving. I guess that is how it's going to look. Not the after election day mail, because of course that's just bullshit Democratic votes. Sorry, true story. But the later arriving mail-in vote tends to get more Republican. The very, very early mail-in vote is the most liberal. Plan to vote in person on election day is obviously more Republican. Plan to vote on election day through a drop-off is actually more Republican. All right, so let's go back to party and let's do vote method detail. Let's go back to the race and let's look at vote method detail. Forget about the combined. Let's look in detail. All right. Among those who already voted in person early with the head to head is even, right? But of course, that's not a real race, right? This is just an estimate of two-party vote share. If you look at the 5-way with leaners, already voted in person is Trump plus 5. Already voted via absentee ballot and drop-off location, like I said, this drop-offs and early mail are going to be the most liberal, but it's only Harris plus 7. This was a huge margin for Joe Biden. Her biggest, obviously, of the already voted, her biggest margin is among those who already voted by mail and turned it in. It's done, and it's Harris plus 13. Plan to vote early in person is Trump 55-42. And I'm going to round here. Now, she's got to suggest there is some votes that are in the bank. It's just that not in the bank. There are some votes that she has in the tank, all right, that haven't gotten to the bank, all right? That makes sense? Plan to vote early, absentee ballot and drop-off location. It's not that big of a group, however, but she's winning this one 57-34. Plan to vote early via absentee ballot by mail, 57-37. Right, so Trump's actually doing a little bit better. Again, typically the later arriving mail gets more Republican, but maybe we'll see. There's signs that Republicans will still have an election day edge. Maybe it's not going to be as big as it typically has been in the past, but it's still significant. And she needs a lot. It's not just that these margins really needed to be bigger for her. because Trump being in the 30s in these margins is problematic. All right. Why? Because he's going to win the in-person on election day and the drop off, and he's going to win them by a lot. And that is a problem because he's already ahead with people who voted in person, and he's barely trailing with people who dropped off, and he's not trailing as much as he usually is among those who already voted by mail. I mean, that's a nightmare for her. All right. So plan to vote in person on election day. 55 Trump, 41 Harris. And then plan to vote on election day via drop off, same margin, 55-41. Eek. And the problem with this vote, you're going to have to wait for it. That secure drop off location in states like Arizona will not be counted for like 4 days. So we'll have to see what is already voted in person and already voted via absentee ballot margin is in Arizona, which is why people think he's actually ahead by probably, I don't want to say it out loud, but yeah. When all is said and done, it could be as high as 6 points. Because she's got to win this independent vote by a huge margin. And among all registered voters, she's got a few point lead. But among likely voters, she doesn't. Among independents. So that's why I want to nest that stuff for you, because I want you to see the difference. This is fascinating. And I think, I'm not sure anybody has done it this detailed before. And I'm not sure anybody has done it in a way that that actually looks pretty close to what we know the early vote is already. And then if that is fairly close, then there's no reason to be skeptical of whether we can trust the rest of intention. All right. Does that make sense? Now, again, that's the job of the campaigns, both sides. They got to get whatever of those groups are best for them to the polls. It just looks like one is more proficient at doing that. So why is this? This should explain it to you. So this idea that Harris is winning 10% of the Republican early vote. Okay. And Boner from Target Fart is making a huge deal about this. Okay. Well, don't knock the internet out. Oh, no. Can somebody tell me on locals whether or not they can even hear me? Can you guys still hear me? Or I don't know if the backup worked or not. It looks like it did. Locals. Yeah, cool. All right, thanks, Laggardus. Yeah, the backup was there. I just didn't know if it had enough juice to keep it going after the other plug was removed. So there's like a surge protector, and then there's a backup, and it's got juice in it. So like if something was to happen, like happened to me, a week or two ago, it will not end the show, because as long as I get it replugged in, the battery pack will last. Okay, so looking at this data, where I'm going with this was, Boner from Target Fart is making it out like Harris winning 10% of the early Republican vote is somehow this like great thing. It is not. The vote will be much more Trumpy on election day, which will shrink her overall margin, even if she was to win the 10% crossover. It suggests that she will actually come in lower than Hillary Clinton, if that's the case. Who, by the way, he projected was winning 20% of the early vote. That was Republican. Biden, even more in some places. He's winning like 23% of the early vote in Wisconsin. That is Republican. Yeah, So the fact is, her most liberal vote that she has, as we can see here, the already voted and dropped off vote, the already voted by straight up mail vote. That's going to be her most liberal vote. That's Republican. And as time goes on, it will get less liberal for her. And so why? Because even if she does do marginally better here, like it suggests she possibly can with these two categories that plan to vote early still, but haven't yet, she's going to get crushed with plan to vote in person on election day, and she's going to get crushed by plan to vote via absentee ballot and drop off. I'm talking about 95-2, 98-2, 97-2. Like that's going to be the margin. Her biggest opportunity to pluck off Republican votes is behind her, or about to be behind her within the next 48 to 72 hours in most states. All right. All right. What else can we go over here? You know what? We can't. We got to take a real quick break. Let's take a 30-second little countdown break. When we come back, we'll pay the bills, and then we will continue on more with this. There's a couple other clips that we got to go over this gaffe. I mean, is this gaffe really going to hurt him? We got to go over it. Actually hurt him, hurt her, but we will. All right. Stay where you are. You're watching Inside the Numbers with the People's Pundit. I'm your host, Rich Maris, People's Pundit. Don't forget to like the videos if you like them. Share them for them. Why? We'll be back in 30 seconds. I got some religion detail stuff I want to go over, and we're going to do that in a second here. But real quick, before we do, the world, obviously, is in tumult. Damn near chaos. Seriously, though. Stock market's unpredictable, right? And inflation being what it is, as well as the debt bomb that's still ticking in our ear, it's no wonder that people are looking for places to protect their wealth. And if you ever thought about, gold, silver, investing in currencies, then the folks at Freedom Gold are the place to go. And they really are. All about just giving you the information that you need to make you confident about making a decision, right? So also another thing I love about them is no matter what, you decide to take advantage of, you're still going to get free shipping and insurance on all orders. That includes when they drop down the minimum requirement to get in just for our viewers, right? These houses are like 50K minimum, 20K minimum, 10K minimum. Even Freedom Gold is 5, but not for you. It's 500. That's it. And we have some winners of the prize pool. We just haven't had a chance. It's been so busy with the election. We're going to make a recording that we're going to be able to air on like a Saturday that's going to announce who won every month. All right. So that's going to be the plan going forward because election season just gets too busy to have an interview. So yeah, definitely give them a call. 888-279-3592, 888-279-3592, or go to the website. That's just for us. So is that number, by the way, freedomgoldusa.com/rich. There are all those deals. Some of them I just told you about. There's $500 credit on a new gold or silver IRA. There's a lot of stuff you're going to qualify for if you are a listener and you go to that website. All right. So there are others as well. So check it out. See what deals you may like. Maybe like something else better. Right. But again, it doesn't hurt even if you give them a call to tell them the People's Pundit sent you. They're going to know you're calling from that number, but it still doesn't hurt. 888-279-3592 or freedomgoldusa.com/rich. All right. Let's look at the final numbers here as we're wrapping up on religion. You got Franklin and Marshall. You got Suffolk University, which, by the way, just came out with a tiny Trump plus in Michigan, too. You got Monmouth. What? That's crazy. All showing Trump ahead in these Great Lakes states. He needs one. Look, if he runs through the Sun Belt, which Harris, by the way, I told you, did I or did I not tell you that Harris was pulling out of North Carolina? It's like people think I'm full of shit or something. Like, how long have you been listening to me? I know you guys don't, but it's like these people should learn their damn lessons already. Obviously, if I'm making a claim that she's pulled out of broadcast in these major media markets in North Carolina, I spoke to someone or two or three, and I know for sure that she's doing that. And I knew it was going to Virginia specifically because they told someone. I don't bullshit people. I told you so. So the public polling may show that the race is shifting a point, 2 points in Trump's favor, but the internal polling does not. So North Carolina has been a pain to poll for these people for a long time. They did not all of them, by the way. Survey USA did not do a good job with the Senate race. They had Beasley winning by 2 points. Of course, Ted Budd won. He won easily. A lot of these people had Biden up, 6, 3, 8, whatever. Cal Cunningham up over Tillis, 8, 10, 11 points. Cooper up over Forrest, even though Forrest lost, he lost, but he lost by 4 points. Not the 18 points that Marist had him up. It's outrageous. North Carolina is a tough state. All right. The early voting data, again, Republicans are leading. Never happens. And Barnes and I have talked about how this impacts independent turnout. If one side is more juiced than the other, it tends to, and sometimes more so, impact the independent, the leaning independents that will go out and vote. So it's like it can determine the margin among indies. But also, Harry was just talking about the massive voter registration. It's changed. North Carolina reminds me a little bit like Florida now. And also, in case nobody was paying attention, which a lot of people weren't, everyone was focused on Florida. North Carolina did have a red wave in 22. All right. Both state Senate, Supreme Court seats. Both legislatures. The Senate race. So let's look at religion, because all of these Great Lakes states, especially Pennsylvania, Michigan, right? They have Pennsylvania, huge component of the Catholic vote, be like 30% of the electorate. The winner of the state in, oh my God, everyone, going back to when? I don't recall a year in which it's been that long. Wow. I'm going through elections in my head. Biden won the Catholic vote. He won the state of Pennsylvania. Trump won the Catholic vote. He won the state of Pennsylvania. Obama won it. He won the state of Pennsylvania twice. Bush won it. He won this. Oh, he did not win the state of Pennsylvania. That's right. He came within a couple thousand votes. I don't know if he won it by that big of a margin at all. I'd have to go back and look. But in modern years, maybe Bush in 04. That may be the last time, because he didn't win it in 2000. But yeah, that may be it. But in any event, in the modern era, for instance, Biden won it by like a point. And he won the state of Pennsylvania. In Pennsylvania itself, I'd have to look. I think it was literally 1 point. But here we are now. And here are the details by religion. All right. Catholic vote truly is a swing vote. If you look at the head-to-head, it's Trump 53.4 to 46.6 with leans among Catholics. But the margin is actually, well, I guess it stays roughly the same. But it goes from 6 to 8 when you include the full real ballot. All right. This is the detail one where we break down Baptists, Lutherans, Episcopalians, Methodists, Adventists, Presbyterians as other Christian, instead of where, like, if you go to the regular religion demographic, it's going to say Protestant, other Christian. Yeah, well, this separates Protestant. You can see, obviously, Trump is crushing at 60-40 among Protestants. She's only at 38% of Protestants in the five-way. Look, Biden did much better among Protestants than that, and he did better among Catholics. He won them. She's losing them to Donald Trump. And this is not a one-off. This is now a very clear and consistent pattern, and he's widened his lead now since the last national poll we did. So This is not a good sign for her, and it's not a good sign for her in the Mid-Atlantic, where, by the way, it's basically tied. And it's tied because Trump is doing better in New York than he typically does, and he's doing exceptionally well in Pennsylvania and New Jersey. So the Mid-Atlantic is way closer than it should be. Guess who is all over the Mid-Atlantic? Catholics. New York, New Jersey, also filled with Catholics. The other Christian groups, Trump is winning 54-41, Eastern Orthodox or Greek, Russian, other. Big undecided vote there, but actually, it's like Trump is a Russia. Actually, typically Democrats win Orthodox Russians. All right. Not recently though. Trump has made really big gains among these groups. A very small sample size. I'm not sure how much we can glean from 27 interviews, folks, honestly. The Jewish vote, Trump is in the 30s in the head-to-head. He's just under it among Jewish voters with leaners. Mormons, Trump 57-43, and then 45-38 in the five-way. Muslims, very interesting. Muslims should not be basically 60-40. You got to wonder, after all these things you're hearing about, under these groups, you have mayors, you have activists, leaders in Dearborn, leaders in Detroit. This was a little bit surprising to me. Republicans don't do this well among Muslims. How bad do Republicans do among Muslims? If you go back and look at our national polling in 2020, you will see Trump at like 17%. Another religion is typically a Democratic group, and it is here now 58-42, although it is not as big as the margin Joe Biden enjoyed. Ditto for no religion, which Joe Biden was winning in the 70s or something like that. It's ridiculous. Here, she's winning it by a big margin. Don't get me wrong, 69-31. But she's losing among core religious groups so badly. It's, folks, let me be blunt here. And I think anyone, if you like, pin them against the wall and got them to be honest with you, there's just no scenario in which you win the election if you lose Catholics that badly. There just isn't. Joe Biden was a Catholic. This idea that she's going to outperform Joe Biden in Pennsylvania is absolutely ludicrous. Scranton Joe, dude. The argument would be, well, things are different now. You know, January 6th, people don't give a shit about January 6th outside of their core group. And in fact, when we put trust to handle issues in there, you will see that on the issue of, where is it? Threats to democracy and corruption. This is regardless of how you intend to vote or who you intend to vote for, whom do you trust more to handle each of these issues? Threats to democracy and corruption is Harris plus 1. 1. Let me say that again. 1. That is nothing. They have neutralized themselves on that issue by going after their political opponents, weaponizing the justice system, and trying to persecute their political opponents. They have forfeited that issue basically completely. Not basically, completely. The only issue that is and by the way, that's number 5, that issue. It's right behind abortion. The only issue that's in the top 5 that Harris leads with is abortion. And she leads by, I think it's like 12 points. Less than Trump leads among the third most important issue, which is immigration. And he leads by a larger margin. And then he leads, of course, on the economy and jobs, and he leads on cost of living, inflation. And he leads on that by a larger margin than he leads on economy and jobs. So the second, that's called, those are fundamentals, folks. And I just don't know how you overcome it. A little interesting here was union. Maybe breaking it down makes a little bit more sense, by the way. But look at union households. Among those who are not union households, Trump is winning by 1 point. And stupid idiot on Twitter, he's like, how could it be 51-50? That's how it can dumbass. 50.5 plus 49.5 equals what, schmuck? All you do is sit on Twitter all day and clip videos of other people's lives. You're the biggest fucking loser, I think, is on Twitter. You're the biggest political Twitter loser. Union households. What? Harris, 52.2 to 47.8? What? That's worse than Hillary Clinton. Why? Because talk of that. Union households. Trump did better with private, not public. Let's check that, shall we? And then, by the way, she's only still ahead by 5 with the 5-way ballot. That's it. That is not good. So this is what happens when you make sure you stay in the field and you do what you got to do. Look, I mean, public is damn near tied. You would think it was from private. It could be noise. But I don't know, guys. Union's a union. That is where Pennsylvania comes in. And actually, you will see the difference in states like Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, where the public sector unions are going to be much more Trumpy than the private. What else can we look at? Marital is going to be very simple and easy. Although I am curious to see whether or not Trump made some grounds with some more. Typically, he did. So So separated, typically a very Democratic group. Divorced is a Democratic group. Look at how close it is. That's very close. So he's stomping Harris among people who are married. 56 to 44 in the head-to-head. 54 to 42 in the 5-way. Among widowed voters, she's got a little bit of a lead. Again, I want to show you age because this is what's going on with other pollsters. She's probably not going to win seniors. Trump will probably edge them out. I'm going to show you why that is. Single, she's winning, but everything else is for Trump. Look for my age detail. All right. Here we go. Okay. A lot of pollsters don't break down age by detail this way, and they'll get 65 to 100 or, whatever it may be that they round off at. Some round off at 99. And they will not break down super seniors, and they will not see how much of their 65 plus sample is either 65 to 74 versus 75 plus. So senior versus super senior. You can see that super seniors are much more Trumpy than the lower end seniors are, the younger seniors are, right? And that is often when I get a data set from a pollster, it's like, damn, I overestimated Democratic support among seniors. I always say, give me the data set and let me look at it. And when I upload it, for instance, if the sample was 22% senior, okay, it will be like 6% 65 plus or something, maybe even lower. And that's why they're hard to get on the phone. It depends on your mode of collection. Online, a lot of them have a difficult time taking a poll online. It can be very tough for them, right? So there are ways to fix that, by the way. I don't know how developed or advanced the software is that you use, but if you're doing, for instance, text to online, when he clicks on the link and he does the screener and the age screen comes up, if it's a certain age or more, you use the template that increases font size. Give them a larger font. All right, because a lot of them will abandon the survey because they can't see it. All right, which is why peer-to-peer, obviously, they're going to be on a phone they can read. Peer-to-peer is certainly helpful in that regard, right? Sorry, I had to take a puff. There you go. When people decide, we're starting to see some normal margins, right, that we've seen in the past, or at least how we expected these things to kind of trend out. 40 to 49 went back to Trump. 50 to 64 is a Trump. 30 to 39 is a Harris, although it's closer than it was for Biden. 25 to 29, actually the entire 18 to 29 group. Every poll is finding this. We're confirming it. We've been finding, sometimes it's 18 to 24 that's more Trumpy. Sometimes it's 25 to 29, but hell, even a Harris plus 5 among 18 to 24 is abysmal. Abysmal. We're not the only ones seeing it. Everyone is seeing it. There usually is more 18 to 24s, but we'll see. I at least have some reason to suspect that won't be the case this year, but we'll see. We'll see. And we did actually put 18 to 29s a little bit higher than the census suggested they were in 2020. Right? Not that we put them. I mean, it's just percentage of those who say they're certain or likely to vote, right? And that's we don't tell the electorate what to do. All right. Again, among all likely voters, as you can see, Trump's leading in the Midwest and he's leading in the South. She's leading in the West and leading in the Northeast. But if you break it down by region, why is division not here? Ooh, hold on. Division, census division should be in here. Well, I'm just going to tell you for now, but because I'm going to stop sharing the screen, we're going to go into the back end and we're going to do party by gender and stuff like that. I'm going to actually education by race, sex by race. I'm going to go over that first, but then we'll go in the back end. I'll show you a little bit more detail here. But you can see that most of that Northeast region, it looks closer than it typically is, and it is. And the reason why is because the Mid-Atlantic is closer than it usually is. New England is going for Harris almost as much as it went for Biden. So, we'll see how that goes when it comes to states like Maine and New Hampshire. She's not getting the margin that he got, but it still is one of her biggest margins. And the Mid-Atlantic is a problem area for her. All right. So Joe Biden was going into the Mid-Atlantic, I think 60-40 in 2020. I mean, it's damn near tied. And that's because he's doing better than he has ever done in New York, but he is doing exceptionally well in Pennsylvania and New Jersey. And those three make up the Mid-Atlantic. All right. In the Midwest, again, this is a great example. It's Trump +7 among registered voters, Trump +6 in the head-to-head, but among likely voters, it is not. It's Trump +11 and Trump +10. So that's a big difference in the Midwest. What did I just say? The Mid-Atlantic? I meant the Midwest. And there are two divisions breaking them up, and one of them Trump is a little bit closer, but the other is really not. And that's very important when it comes to how well he can do in a state like Wisconsin. All right. The South, obviously. And if you look at the Eastern Atlantic area, often what can happen in national polls is like the South will look closer than it is. And it's because areas like Virginia and DC and Maryland and Delaware bog down the entire southern region. But if you break down by the census, you will see that actually Trump's doing real well in those Sunbelt states. And he's actually not doing that bad in the Virginia area. Is he going to win it? I don't know. It's a tall order. I don't know. But we'll see. It is kind of giving me vibes of like Youngkin, like the Youngkin vibes. It really is. And by the way, if it wasn't for, again, those so-called right-leaning among us at Big Data Poll, Trafalgar, and Insider Advantage, we're the only ones who had Youngkin up. Oh, sorry, Fox News did. They had a ridiculous +8. Nobody believed. Everybody else, the Washington Post, they eventually herded it to make it close. They did what they're basically doing now for Harris. It's closer, but if she loses, they could say, well, it was close. We're not that far outside the sampling error, or we're within it, depending on each of their results. But there would be no red on those aggregates without us. And the West, she's winning, but when you break that down, obviously it comes from the Pacific. Among the mountain region, he's clapping. Why does that matter? Mountain includes Nevada. It includes Arizona. The West, she's clapping because of California, Oregon, and Washington State. Although 54-41 is not great. And when it's head-to-head, it's actually only 56-44. This is a woman who's from California. All right, 131. Let's talk while we're talking about I jumped over something here. Well, I mean, look, it's fine because we were just talking not only about the Hispanic vote, non-white vote, but just getting into the mountain part of the mountain division and CNN. I don't know what they did with their white vote share and everything. They had in Arizona, they had a even sample. I think it was basically just a hair D. That's insane. Arizona is, as you just heard Harry Enton discuss, Arizona is significantly more Republican than it was in 2020. A lot of these people are waiting for 2020 in these states where Democrats simply don't have those advantages anymore. So they had Harris up 1 in Arizona, which nobody has. And they had Trump up by 1 in Nevada. So let's go. But bottom line is, it's the white vote, because here's a segment they discuss the Hispanic vote right now.
Harris, as I said, had an 18-point advantage with Latinos. Biden in the 2020 exit polls, he had a 24-point advantage over Trump 4 years ago among Latinos in Arizona. Harris is +1 with Latinos in Nevada in our poll, but according to the 2020 exit polls, Biden won them by 26 percentage points.
What are they doing wrong again, folks? Is that an apples to apples comparison? No. The question is, what did CNN's poll have in 2020? And then compare that and also show what that was reality. Then you have the full context.
If that actually is what emerges on election day, that's a big warning sign in Nevada.
Yeah, I would say so. All right. Take my little, what time is it? 1:33. Eventually we have to get in talking about this gaffe. I just really wanted to show you some stuff on the back end. Let's go back to it real quick though. Let's do some education overviews here. Let's do education by sex. All right. And then we'll do education by gender. I mean by sex and race. And I'm going with sex from now on, in case you guys haven't noticed. It's like nobody ever wants to say the S word or something. Like we're all a bunch of friggin' children. Sex, 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 sex. Gender is a manifested word, a created word. It really is no such thing as gender. It is sex, your biological sex. All right. Because why? Why is this bothering me? And why have I decided to do this? After, for years I labeled it gender. Because I'm seeing pollsters now, including pollsters I somewhat respect. Putting this non-binary, putting this other, putting this, how the hell do you know how to weight non-binary gender in your poll? You have absolutely no solid data reference. You're making shit up. What is your sex, male or female? Even the census didn't go down that road. We have estimates from Gallup. We have some, from the ACS, we have some, but that's a very small version. It's like the wannabe census. And we have estimates from certain academic things, but do you believe them? I don't believe a damn word they say. That doesn't matter anyway. That's the practice. That's the best practices argument. The other argument is very simple. Gender is a made-up word, a made-up term. It has no real meaning in the real world. And we should just stick with what has worked forever. Non-college men, obviously, Trump's biggest group. Non-college women, actually, is slightly for Harris. College men, slightly for Trump. College women, slightly for Harris, but not by the margins you see in some of these other polls. Now, overlap that with race because it matters. All right, there we go. Non-college white. Obviously, a very big margin for Donald Trump. Harris about 4 points lower than Joe Biden. Non-college, non-white is ridiculously high numbers for Donald Trump. It's just ridiculous. This is where it is astonishing. And by the way, in the 5-way, college non-white isn't that far behind. That's because of, it's just overlapping groups. Hispanic men, certain Asian voters. She's winning them, but she's not winning them by the margin Biden was winning them by. And then college white We actually have Trump 52, Harris 48. And then in the five-way, Trump 49, Harris 46. That's going to be a big point of contention. Atlas has the same thing, by the way, damn near. So did the New York Times. If you were to, well, they didn't put out, it's not exactly the same. It's not exactly comparable. But the fact of the matter is, Trump tends to poll worse than he performs among white voters who have a college degree. Right? We hear about it going in the election. We hear about it. We hear about it. We hear about it. And then it does not manifest. And it also depends on how you define who does and doesn't have a college education. So, and just so it's very clear, those who have some college or an associate's degree are not considered college in this variable. They are non-college. It is 4-year and higher. That's it. And you'll see if you look at where's education purely. Why isn't it here? I got to put that in there too. Hold on. Where's my little post-it? I got to make a note. Harris's biggest margin, of course, is with post-grads. They are, I think, probably being overstated again. If you look at the census, they were only about 12%. The exit polls have them at like 17. Votecast had them, I think, at 15 or something like that. Guys, they're overstated. Votecast was 15. Yep. Well, the voter validated study by the census after the fact was only 12.4% advanced degree. We actually have it a little over 13. Bachelors, taken together, obviously it's still more non-college than college, but we do think this year it'll be more college white voters as a share. And, that is what it is. I constantly see people say too, oh, you have too many high school or lesses. No, we don't. In 2020, high school or less was 29.2%. High school only was 29.2%. High school graduate. 9th to 12th grade with no diploma or GED, 5.5%. And then less than the 9th grade, which we call secondary, is 2.1. So actually, combined, they were like 37 and change. All right. It's just the exit polls, maybe this is a good time to talk about this, guys. All right. And then, we have to get into the gaffe thing, and the embargo on the poll will be dropped soon, and you'll be able to go through it yourself. But we have to talk about exit polls. All right. This is like a flashing red siren I'm trying to give to you right now. Take the exit polls, whether it's the national, the NEP, from Edison Research, that'll be like CBS, NBC, probably even the New York Times, and others. Take them and Votecast, who will be AP and Fox News, and probably us. Take them with a grain of salt. Do not overreact whether they're good or whether they're bad for your candidate. The exit polls have been far more wrong than right in the modern era. Let's go down just the last 20 years. In 2020, the exit polls grossly overstated Joe Biden's lead. They basically showed that Biden was going to win the popular vote by almost 9 points and run the table and run it easy. Of course, that didn't happen. By the way, that's why Fox News called Arizona so quickly, because AP Votecast had Joe Biden up over 4 points in Arizona. That was the first wave. They are then, this is also very, very important to acknowledge, they will be revised multiple times on election day and then revised after the election. Okay? In 2016, Donald Trump was losing every single battleground state to Hillary Clinton, according to the exit polls. She was going to win Ohio, or basically it showed that she was very close. She had a lead, but it was within, like, the decision desk wouldn't call it with a lead that big. It was too small. But Sky News called Florida across the pond because of the exit polls. They had to uncall it. Sky is Fox's sister company. They had to reverse their call Trump won Florida. North Carolina was Clinton +4. She lost by 4. And I could just go down the list. Then over the night, they were revising them. Virginia got revised from like Clinton +9 to Clinton +3 and then to Clinton +5. It was all over the place. She thought she was going to, I mean, they were popping the champagne over there because the exit polls showed what they believed was leading up to the evidence leading up to election day, that she was going to win and she was going to win easily. And those pollsters who showed a closer race or even Trump ahead were just wrong. In 2014, even. And I didn't really want to get into midterms, but I mean, 2014 was an abysmal miss for exit polls. 2012. Overstated by Obama's victory, but not by a lot. And later revised. I think the only one. No, it did. It showed Obama up by 2 in Florida. Never mind. Just remembered. But it wasn't awful, but it did overstate Democratic support again. 2008, who cares? I mean, well, I mean, we care. But of course, they were not even measurable. Most people were just like, this race is, they looked at it and it was so pro Biden. I mean, Obama, that they were just like, whatever. I mean, this is just, who cares? It's over. This race is over. In 2004, Tim Russert was popping the champagne. He had this big Cheshire cat shit-eating grin on his face. He just could not contain it sitting at that table, that desk. Why? Because the popular vote was John Kerry +3. It showed John Kerry winning Virginia. He was going to take Virginia from Bush. They were stoked. And Florida, which was just incredible. Ohio was strangely close and it was weird. Kerry was up in Iowa. And no way, like none of the other Rust Belt states were going to be close because Kerry had significant leads. Except Karl Rove in the beginning of the night was, the votes don't make sense compared to the exit polls. I'm looking at some of the suburbs in Richmond. I'm looking at some of the suburbs in Loudoun County was one in particular. I remember like it was yesterday. And then in Florida, he's getting calls from Jeb and his team and Jeb's political team. And they're going, we're going over the returns. These exit polls are wrong. They're wrong. You're going to win Florida. It's not going to be that close. So for hours, Rove was sitting there pushing back, and they're mocking him. And I don't like Karl Rove, but I'm saying like he was actually right, which is like why it pisses me off when I see Rove. He did it in 16, he did it in 20, he does it all the time. Runs to his stupid little whiteboard, which he stole from me, by the way. There are people who know this. I don't have to like try to prove myself. I wrote on the whiteboard. Dude looked at it at CPAC and took the whiteboard idea. Next thing you know, he's on Dana Perino with the whiteboard. Carl and his whiteboard. And Laura and I are like, what the Larry knows. Larry Schweiker. Ask him, he'll tell you. I used to love handwriting stuff. It was like a thing, like almost like a compulsive obsession. Like I needed to like write it down. So I would carry a whiteboard around. It was weird. Math, only math, not everything. Math. Okay. John Kerry loses Florida. He loses it easily. He, of course, loses Ohio, which was critical. He lost Iowa, but the exit poll showed him ahead in Iowa. He was supposed to win. He loses the popular vote, even though the national exit poll showed him winning it by 3. They want to be talk about election deny. They would then take this bogus analysis from a Kerry supporter about how the exit polls proved it was statistically impossible for John Kerry to lose Ohio. It's an exit poll, you idiot. As Murray's been explaining for years, we got problems, man. In 2000, of course, it showed Gore winning the popular vote by a comfortable margin. Another state, another cycle where the exit polls had showed Gore winning Florida, which would have been a major embarrassment to George Bush. Of course, we all know it came down to hanging chads, and the Washington Post wasted millions of dollars doing their own investigation that only concluded that Bush really won by more because Democrats counted votes that weren't legal votes. Shocker! But multiple news agencies called the state of Florida for Al Gore and even began talking about him as if he was the president-elect. And they had to undo that race call because the exit polls were wrong. So whether it's the CES, the co-op study, the co-op election study at Harvard, who just put out their estimates in battleground states, Nate Cohen is so eager for Harris to win, he's mocking his own polling at this point. He's denouncing his own poll just so he can cope over whether or not CES is right. Well, guess what? Pre-election stuff, CES is like never right. I love their work and I love what they do after the election. Just because they collected a lot of interviews does not mean they modeled the electorate correctly. I mean, sometimes the sample size isn't your problem. And do you trust a ton of academics in a co-op like Harvard to put aside their own bias? Dude, they got Trump up by like 4 in Texas right now. That's it. They got him up barely in Arizona. They got him up like one state, which was weird, was like Georgia. They had him up by like 6. But North Carolina, I think, was Harris +1. It was weird. Even though North Carolina in recent years has voted to the right of Georgia. Not in 2016, but that was obviously before some big migration changes to the Atlanta metro area and big economic changes. So you get my point. Whether they are good or bad for your candidate, please take the exit polls with a grain of salt. By the way, the exit polls showed a Republican rout in 22. And that didn't happen. The only one that was even remotely close was North Carolina. Florida, they actually understated DeSantis in Florida, both VoteCast and the exit polls. They had to revise them multiple times until they realized how big his victory was going to be. Rubio, too. Rubio was going to win, but why didn't they call it? Because they're getting exit polls showing Rubio up by only 6 points. 6 or 8 points. I can't remember what it was. It was ridiculous. North Carolina was pretty good. It was decent. It wasn't great, but it was decent. It showed Bud with a mild advantage, a sampling error, or not even, a marginal advantage. But Republicans seemingly doing well everywhere else, so they were very cautious. Nevada and Arizona showed Republican routes, them having a turnout advantage, winning independents, doing Kerry Lake basically tied with Hispanics, and then it got revised over time. Weird. So just take them with a grain of salt. Wait for the votes. We will get Kentucky and Indiana very quickly. We're going to have places like Vigo County, Pike County tell us immediately important stuff that's real, tangible stuff about how we think the election is going to go. By the way, both those counties didn't move an inch from 16 to 20. Not an inch. One of those anomalies where those counties can somehow predict everything. Not everything, but a good deal. And have for many moons, many years, and then suddenly didn't in 2020. So keep it contained. Whether it's concern or jubilation. And I'm talking to both sides here. As I'm telling you, go back and watch Tim Russert. If you end up on the losing end of this, you end up on the ass end of an exit poll miss. It's awful. Tim's dead, so you can't ask him. But my God, you can go back and watch montage of Tim Russert from 04, and you'll see it live. They think they're coasting to victory. And then as time goes on, the reality that the exit polls were wrong suddenly begins to dawn on them. I know many of you were alive, obviously, for Hillary Clinton's ass end of an exit poll moment. If you're Republicans, you were on the ass end of the exit polls in 22. It is not cool. It is not cool. So you've been warned. All right, for the last couple of minutes, let's talk about this gaffe. This is a big gaffe. And if she loses next week, everyone's going to blame Joe Biden for her loss. It will not be any of the things that they did or did not do to address the concerns of the voters. It will not be that they usurped the will of almost 15 million of their primary voters. It will not be that they are not good governors. They're not good stewards of the economy or foreign policy. I'm just reflecting the voters' sentiment here. Okay. So kiss my ass if you're a partisan and you're upset with that statement. You are in the minority. It can't be that they're tone deaf and they are perfectly okay with biological men beating the shit out of women at the Olympics and apparently live on television. Women beating is a new sport now. You can win a gold medal for beating on women. Isn't that progressive? Oh, no, none of that. It'll all be because Joe Biden cost her this election. An old white man cost a young, empowered, non-woman of color. Cost her the election. I guarantee you. It's going to be Joe Biden's fault. And you know who else's fault it's going to be? You're looking at him. And Benny Johnson. And Ben Shapiro. And Joe Rogan. And Tim Pool. And anyone else who got this Media Matters fueled smear email from the New York Times. They're already setting it up. That's their setup for, in case you guys haven't noticed, let me just tell you. Those stories that you're seeing and will see are setups. They're getting ready to delegitimize. If Trump wins, they're getting ready to delegitimize his win. Now, watch. Mark my words. And that's the angle they're going to take. Here's what Biden said. Let's talk, and we'll talk about how the media, Democrats, same thing, try to cover up for it. How the White House actually edited the transcript, what is transcribed as what the president said. Some Orwellian propaganda shit, folks. Oh my God. Scary. It's terrifying. Terrifying. Well, here's what he said. And this is from Benny Johnson, speaking of. He shared it, and the group's tagged in the thing for credit.
Where I'm in my home state of Delaware, they're good, decent, honorable people. The only garbage I see floating out there is his supporters.
The only garbage I see floating out there is his supporters. The only garbage I see floating out there is his supporters.
All right. So very, very clearly, they knew it was very bad, and they immediately moved to strike from the transcribed record what he said, and they tried to make it out like he was talking about the comedian who made the joke about Puerto Rico being an island of garbage, okay? That is not what he said. As you could see right there. I could not believe my ears when I heard it. I was doing, getting the kids ready for bed and everything, but everyone's sick. Every election, it never fails. Everybody gets sick again. They're bringing home some croup. You know what the doctor told us too? I swear, this is a perfect example of this election. It's like everything's negative. It's some kind of virus. And I'm like, well, like they've had the croup for weeks. What kind of virus? Like, they have to have something for the croup. And she's like, I don't know. Probably came across the damn border. I was like, oh my God. And she's probably right. Anyway, so they tried to do this and make this out and it just didn't work. And they knew that this was really bad because they chose to use that comedian's joke as big part. It was the main story it's been the main story since the weekend. It is the number one story being covered by the media for 3 days almost. So now when this happens, they try to bury it and cover it up. It's not going to work. So this was Charlie Kirk. I got to tell you this. Charlie Kirk told me, I don't know, Rich, this is risky. This could backfire. And this is what he meant. Deciding to use what they decided to use as their closing message. Very risky. for multiple reasons. One of them, this one. Very easy to throw it back at you because Democrats are impulsive and they say things sometimes that are just really impulsive. The basket of deplorables. Clingers. Right? We've heard these before. All right. So Harris is confronted, by the way, by a foreign reporter who tries to give her a layup and help her clean it up. And she can't even do that. Let's be honest. The woman is an awful candidate. I told you she was from the beginning. She's proven herself to be an absolutely awful candidate. And I mean, she's illegitimate. I mean, if she goes on, Harry's like, oh, the signs were there. Duh. I'm frankly a little bit nervous that more Democrats don't seem to care that they shat on their sovereignty. Anyway, here she is getting another layup, getting a mulligan. They literally, the media, when they do this with her, they spell out in their question what exactly she needs to say to clear it up. Listen, let me say it exactly how the polling, exactly how the focus groups are telling us we need to say it. And I'm going to say it in a way that gives you the answer. And she's still idiot. She cannot do it.
Sympathise with any voters who do feel offended by or insulted by the garbage comments.
I am running for president of the United States. I will be traveling to 3 states today to do what I have been doing throughout, which is talking with the American people about the fact that, first of all, I get it in terms of the concerns they have about challenges like the price of groceries.
She's incapable. Totally incapable. She just can't do it. She just can't do it. All right, I want to end with 2 real quick things on potential polling misses. And the embargo will be dropped soon here. And just got some stuff I want to give to locals first. Like I said, I'll be on Charlie Kirk at 2:30 to talk about this, the polling method stuff, the data on the polling method specifically. All right. But here's one. Even Atlas is struggling with North Carolina polling. It's tough. Very tough. Actually, it's weird. One of those states in North Carolina where I've actually done a better job consistently in midterm elections than I have in presidential elections. And that's because I don't know, tighter voter screens, which I should have used in other states like Pennsylvania. It's just that sometimes voters will tell you they're going to vote in higher numbers than they do. So, lessons learned. What can you say? Right. But North Carolina have done a consistently better job midterms. Overstated Trump by a little bit in North Carolina in 2020, but not by much. And in 2016, nailed it. But I think I had I don't know, like a half a point more than he won by or something like that. But it's tough. I was lucky to like kind of get a hang of it kind of quick. Also, I'm from this. Well, I'm not from, but I have a house in North Carolina. So I know people in North Carolina in political world, the state government, and it was a debated thing about the census undercounting certain parts of the state. And we knew that. And a lot of pollsters didn't acknowledge that when they were polling that Senate race and polling the state Supreme Court races and everything else. And they just keep blowing it. So it's been going on for a while. It's just the 2020 census was like an acknowledgement. Like, wait a minute. This is not correct. And so a lot of pollsters will start with census references, and that is not a good idea. If you know what I mean, it's just not always a good idea. Let me put it that way. I just start with the voter file reference. That's what I do. The voter file is never going to fail. Well, that's not true. It's not perfect. But I mean, you're going to see the changes even if the census doesn't, or at least to some degree. And then there's this question I just want to add. This is what I want. This is separate, but I wanted to show you this. I'm going to do a nesting of the early vote by gender and party. So you can see, I've tried to explain this to people. It isn't surprising to me that women are voting at higher rates in some states than men in most, because women Republicans were easier to convince to vote early than men were. Men were still much more likely to say, A, I want to vote on election day. B, okay, I'll vote by absentee ballot, but I'm going to drop it off on election day. Okay. And then later in-person early voting tends to get more male, and I think that's going to be an exacerbated trend here as well. But they hold off. And women were, when we were researching how to motivate Republicans to vote early, very, very, very clear in the data that women were more receptive to that message. Most likely source of the polling miss either way. Again, there are repeated groups that don't show up, and I'm telling you, that's what that's more likely to hurt. That is more likely. Hold on one second, guys. I'm going to do. I cannot do that. I can only do the 2:30. Still rapping. Yeah. So that's where it is. That's where it's at. They do want me to try to boogie and go here. I'll try to get on with them real quick. Go check out the Charlie Kirk show. I'm going to hop over there and talk to them. All right. Maybe we'll talk about that more over there. All right. But don't forget, keep your eye on locals and on it all, because I'll be popping on here and there and everywhere. Nothing but love for all of you. See you soon. And as always, thanks for watching Inside the Numbers. Don't forget to like and share far and wide.